We had the heavy rail, so not too late. That is.
Can I bounce?
And it runs Monday through Friday, and it's pretty much maxed out right now. I mean, it's.
When I first started there.
All right, thanks everybody for coming in today for the August 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Transportation Coordinating Committee. Call the meeting to order. First item on the, I think I'm usually supposed to say something about the live stream. This meeting is being live streamed. If anybody has any questions, put your questions in the chat box. I think we can look at that. First item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the July or the June meeting, rather. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Did you get that, Ms.
Mhm.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. And opposed? None. We'll move on to item number 2, public comment. Do we have any members of the public in attendance this morning that would like to make a comment on anything on the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to the next items. I believe we just have informational items on the agenda here today, and I'll turn it over to Daniel Caparella for our staff presentation.
All right, Chair. Morning, everybody. So just 2 informational items today, no action items. A lot of you may remember the Carbon Reduction Program. It's a new program with the most recent federal legislation, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. It's very similar to the CMAQ program, which most of you are probably familiar with. About $6.4 billion is available nationwide. 139 million apportioned for Tennessee, and then for our urbanized areas, a little less than 14 million suballocated to the Nashville-Davidson urbanized area, and a little less than 2 million suballocated to the Murfreesboro urbanized area. In terms of eligible projects, very similar to the CMAQ program. ITS, electrification upgrades, vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure, public transit, bike ped facilities, street lighting, and traffic signal upgrades. Typically requires a 20% non-federal match. There are some exceptions. Some projects can be funded at 100% federal, and it has an obligation deadline within 4 years of apportionment. So those funding numbers are for the extent of the TIP period, so all 4 years. Our recommended approach for prioritizing this funding, I know many of you have local projects that are and have experienced cost overruns, whether they are CMAQ projects, TAP projects, or multimodal access grant awarded projects. Those cost overruns and what you may have in there in terms of funding currently may not be enough. And with many of you wanting to move forward on your projects, we and the mayors of TPB, our board, wanted to recommend an approach for programming these funds. In terms of a timeline for programming, there will be a special called TPB meeting on August 16th, in which potentially the TPB will issue a call for projects, and then local agencies will be open to submit applications to us. Staff will evaluate, and then at the next TPB meeting on September 20th, hopefully we will, and the board will announce the first batch of awards and TIP amendments for some of those projects that need funding more urgently. And then on November 15th, the second batch of awards and TIP amendments. So we can add those that additional funding to the TIP. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, Daniel. Wasn't fully listening. I apologize. I'm gonna own it. We have to resubmit items in the TIP and how we're gonna fund it and send it back for consideration, or wanting additional funding through the MPO to go for that toward our project.
Towards your projects.
Okay, so it's
for
fund-
existing TIP projects.
Okay.
And
How much funding is available in the MPO for consideration?
so 13.8 million for the Nashville-Davidson urbanized area and 1.9 million for the Murfreesboro
And
urbanized
what
area.
makes up the 13.8 million for the Nashville-Davidson urbanized area? Who all is included in that?
So everyone in the Nashville area except for Murfreesboro and Rutherford County. believe that is correct. And then obviously for the Murfreesboro nice area, Rutherford County,
Thank you.
Murfreesboro.
There's some map of the urbanized area on one of the attachments.
Staff report on that last page. Are
That was
map of urbanized areas. Yes, Bill.
Daniel, can we apply for more than one phase or project with these? We have two projects.
Any existing projects are eligible for this program, as long as they fit the eligibility for the national program. And I would,
Eligibility and all of this been, is that in our packet?
I don't think it's in your packet.
So
but
can you
these
share
slides-
this? Can you share these slides out with everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
It's the eligibility items is in the packet.
It is. Okay.
Yes. It's under the agenda item 4A. Third paragraph.
Vital right now, correct?
Yes.
Half of that number is vital.
Thank you, John.
You have a road widening project. Can you apply the bike and pedestrian category for eligibility? If there were proposed to be bike refuges on the sides in the shoulder or anything?
I don't believe so because it's a road winding. I don't think it would be, because the project itself is a road winding. I don't think it would be eligible. Melanie,
I'm saying if you had a road widening project that was in the TIP or CMAC or these other categories, could, and it's got cost overruns that are keeping it from getting done, could you apply for bike and pedestrian facilities to help offset some of those cost overruns for the road widening project, if the road widening project included bike refuges?
I'd have to look into that to see if that would exactly be eligible, but I think it'd be capacity adding with the carbon reduction program, there'd have to be clear delineation that that's going only to bike ped infrastructure.
we can work with. If they're on that.
And sort of the source of my question is, it sounds as though, based on the staff recommendation, that you're prioritizing stuff that's already in the TIP with CMAC TAP or MMAG funds to fund what sounds like cost overruns, in my opinion, for existing projects. And we've got a boatload of stuff out there that we need to get into the TIP or CMAC or whatever. Many of them are state projects. I would like to see some of our grants have some eligibility for getting some of those in there, similar to what they did with the, I forget what the name of the grant program was, but when they took some of the gas tax and funded the Improve Act. Yeah.
Well, since this program does have an obligation deadline of 4 years, we're going to be prioritizing projects that have later phases like right of way and construction that need funding. So we can obligate quickly so that we don't risk those funds lapsing.
Sure.
But
I understand.
yeah, we can work with you to find other sources of funds for the projects that you're referencing.
With regard to the timing, if you go back to the timing slide. So if you're awarding the first batch on September 20th and you're issuing the call for projects on the 16th, is there going to be like a formal application process, or is it more just submitting? I guess what's happening between the 16th and the 20th?
Staff evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be working through that with our board, exactly how they.
I guess my confusion was that jurisdictions and agencies submit applications to GNRC. Is that due on the 16th? Or
No, that will not be
That-
due on the 16th. The
Okay.
call for projects will be
Okay.
issued on.
That's what I thought, but I'm gonna make sure.
For submittal.
We haven't worked that out yet.
That's what I wanted to.
Because we,
Okay.
yeah, well, the board will be issuing that, and then we'll be working very quickly after that to get you a very detailed timeline and exactly when applications are due. And
How are the projects going to be evaluated?
they'll be evaluated based on their eligibility for the program and where they are in the development process. So we will not be funding like NEPA and design. Likely it will be right of way and construction will be prioritized phases. And I know many of you have CMAC projects that have experienced cost overruns and are waiting on additional funding that TDOT may not be able to provide from their CMAQ program.
And so if we end up with more applications for more funding than is available, how's that decided? Who gets the award?
We'll be working through that as staff and just we'll have to figure out exactly how we prioritize it. But we can get a more detailed list of criteria to this body. Sure.
So I think to continue to like piggyback off of that, there is a list of criteria in which staff will be evaluating the applications. And will you share out those criteria with this group so that we know how to put together a, thank you.
Absolutely. Felix?
I know CMAQ has like a 3-year limit, for example, if you want to use it for transit operations. Is this has the same restrictions that we know?
I'm not sure about that, Melanie. We'll get back to you on that. Any other questions?
Not in the TIP now, it's not eligible for the supplemental funds. Would there be a call, if we were awarded a project and we get it in the TIP, would be a subsequent call, maybe next year, next spring or something?
I would predict that we'll get all of this funding programmed. I mean, it's not that much, and I know people have a lot of cost overruns right now. So I wouldn't count on that if I were you. There being an additional call for this funding, but if it is renewed after the 4 years of funding that's provided right now, that's potential in the future. But yeah.
Are all the CMAQ grants that are funded in the region on the tip?
Currently, yes.
Additional question, were the projects that were funded through CRISA and then were rescinded, were those placed on the tip?
Those are still on the
Still on the
tip
tip.
as projects.
Okay.
We just need to figure out how we're gonna backfill the funding that was.
I just want to make sure they were placed on the tip.
Which is why it's going away.
Although all of that CRISA funding was obligated on a TDOT project and.
Correct. Yeah, the funding didn't, it just
We
went
didn't
away.
actually lose it, but.
Just
yeah,
went away.
that's correct. All right, any other questions? Okay. Giles?
Next item we have on the agenda, 4B, federal aid urban boundary. Staff is going to present the draft federal aid urban area boundary that's been updated as a result of this body's review and comment. So Max, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This is not the first time that this group has seen the federal aid urban boundary and been presented with exactly what needs to be done. Essentially, we need to make sure that the entirety of the urbanized area in our region is encompassed with the federal aid urban boundary, which will designate urban and rural when it comes to functional classification of roadways. Next slide. And this is what the draft looks like, even after the comments that we've received. I believe Gallatin and Nashville were the only changes that we've received to this point.
The black line is where you're proposing the boundary.
Correct. And the pink is the large urban area, orange is the small urban areas.
Is there a way, I know it's small scale, but is there a way to provide at least the interstate system or something so we kind of get our bearings?
Yeah, there's also an application if we go to the next one. There you go. So if you go to the GNRC.org maps federal aid, you can actually zoom in as far as you'd like, layer in city limits. It gets a little interesting when you start looking at city limits, urban areas, and then trying to figure out how the federal aid urban boundary would interact with those. So I would recommend using this platform to get into the details. And so we're just looking to get any comments in preparation of this month's board, where they will be approving a draft to send to TDOT, which will then work with Federal Highway on ultimate approval with the hopes of getting it all set in December.
Back 2 slides. Can you tell me what the black line is, north of Spring Hill? Looks like 840. Is that looks like about the line of 840, but
Correct. So in years past, we have not separated the federal aid urban boundary by urbanized areas. Per Melanie's recommendation, we are now doing that. And I selected the line that was the most logical way to divide the Spring Hill large urban area and the Nashville Davidson urban area. I believe a portion of it is 840, a portion of it is the city limits of each of those jurisdictions that interact there.
so Thompson Station goes north of 840, right, Micah? And so Spring Hill city limits would be down. Where that line isn't making sense to me.
That was a really hard area. So there's actually city limits of I believe it's Thompson Station that go into the Spring Hill urban area, and there's parts of Spring Hill city limits that go into the Nashville urbanized area. So the city limits don't align with urban area. That's a census defined geography based on density of households and populations.
You're splitting Thompson Station in half.
No, well, it'll be a portion. So it's not in half, but it is
But it's not one or the other, it's in both.
correct. And I tried my hardest to keep city limits within the same urban area that they are named, but it is impossible. You actually can't do it.
So we'll be a standalone area of our own, basically, with Thompson Station,
A portion.
with a portion of Thompson Station.
A large urban area, much like Murfreesboro is a large urban area now. The lines, I don't think, and Melanie, you can speak to this more, you don't have to spend MPO money in a certain portion based on where that line is drawn, but those are the general areas that are associated with those urban areas.
Yeah, I don't think, there's not a huge, I think, implication for jurisdictions on where the urban area versus a rural area is. So I don't think it's too much to worry about. I think that, the biggest thing with the adjusted urbanized area is that urban rural classification, that designation, and being able to spend, federal aid funds on certain categories of function classified roadways. So.
Yeah, I think a question would be like if a project in Spring Hill that's in the Nashville Davidson urban area were to be needed, could you spend Spring Hill urban area funds in Davidson?
That's not gonna be an issue.
And it should be. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able.
It's not gonna be an issue for us because according to the way this line is drawn, we are 100% on our own area. It's Thompson Station that you've got split, so you
I
can't,
believe a portion of Spring Hill goes into the Davidson urban area.
not according to that map.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think according to that map. I'll look at it closer, but yeah, I don't think it's according to that map.
Max, one of the predominant things, though, that this map does do is determine what road section, for instance, on a state route that the state may use with regard to construction or design. They may, yes, they may. So where you got kind of a janky little kind of intrusion of rural between Gallatin and Lebanon, you may go from urban to rural for a short section of, for instance, 109 back to an urban section. So from that perspective, while I understand what you've done, you've tried to find the nearest, clearest logical line to where the urbanized area is by census data. It makes some sense possibly to from a on the ground at some time, maybe round that out even further. But
Yeah, we're open to suggestions. So if there's any changes that you wish to make, make that recommendation and we'll definitely consider it. That was one area that we had, excuse me, not, that, we had definitely thought about the 109
that's
in
pretty
between
much the
Gallatin.
primary impact of this line is what TDOT chooses to use on the state route in terms of
At the starting point for cross section, also eligibility. So if you're a minor collector in a rural area, you wouldn't be Fed Aid eligible, but if you're in an urban area as a minor collector, you would be. It did, this 2020 update did not affect any roads in a negative way. It did allow for more.
Tom's arguing for the LaGuardo urban narrowest area.
not at this point, it's already done, but if you'll recall, we did do, as an MPO, we funded a regional study that called for limited access and things of that nature, and because part of that was in a rural section, that's not what TDOT ultimately designed and constructed. So we now have unlimited curb cuts in spite of what this MPO's study suggested.
Y'all did probably. No, so-
Well, I encourage you to take us up and submit any recommendations that you think need to be included.
Is that something that could be approved, Max? I mean, could that area in between Gallatin and Lebanon be designated as an urban area? I mean, there has to be other factors, right? Beyond just,
I don't think that there is a clear cut, yes, it can, no, it can't, but we would take into consideration urban growth boundaries, our forecast, what do we expect to be urban as time goes on? And if that's a conservation area, then we're probably not going to recommend that it do that. But if it is a area that is growing rapidly and has, focused growth being channeled in that direction, then I don't see any reason why we wouldn't consider it.
The same thing can be said, just pointing out Wilson County for South Mount Juliet Hobson Pike corridor. That's a growing area both in Davidson County and Wilson County, and probably in northwest Rutherford. And see where it kind of pokes in right there at the lake.
Tom, me and Max did talk about a little bit about that, about the Wilson County side of the Cumberland River, where Cherokee Marina is, and some other acre lot subdivisions. And he included that in the urban growth boundary on the south side of the river. But the majority of the LaGuardo area, including some acre lot subdivisions, was not included.
anybody else have any questions for Max? Max, did you have anything else?
That's it. I would say get us any recommendations sooner rather than later, but we'll be presenting this in 2 weeks to the board.
As you all kind of work with TDOT to finalize it, are you guys going to kind of bring it back? If there's, I guess, significant change.
If there's significant changes,
Yeah.
yeah.
This won't be the last time, I guess, folks have a chance to provide input on it.
I guess the only thing to add would be, this is step one. Step two, we'll be working with the functional classification as a result of these changes. So, keep in mind if there's any roadways that you think need to be changed due to their change in functional classification over the last 10 years, then we'll be reaching out probably over the next year to do that.
Do we need to reach out to you, or will you guys reach out to us on those changes?
You can reach out to us and we'll get you headed in the right direction. I think, we've already been in contact a little bit, and in certain cases, we'll point you towards TDOT to go through their process. But yeah, reach out to us or TDOT, either way, either one.
Do you have anything else? Questions?
I will just note functional class, the urban rural, that's not a functional class change. I think I'm just making a question a little bit is like, that's just that's automatic with this process, is that an area is urban or it's rural. You don't have to put in a request and be like, oh, this changed for rural. Just been getting that a little bit.
Yeah, probably more of like a local road to a collector or collector to an arterial.
Yeah. And an actual class change would be kind of what has to go through a process.
All All right, nobody else has any questions. We'll move on to the regular report section of the agenda. First up, it's the Federal Highway Report. Melanie Murphy.
I feel like anytime I talk to y'all, it's about NOFOs. There's more money out there. So, and which is, you know, a great thing. So there's been 5 kind of programs released, but in 2 funding opportunities. So in late June, the multimodal project discretionary grant program was released. This is a joint NOFO that covers 3 programs. The MEGA program, the infra program, and the rural program. So it's about $5.5 billion available via that funding opportunity. So it's one opportunity, but you can apply for 3 different programs via that opportunity. And that closes August 21st, so this month. And there's another joint funding opportunity, the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program. So this is the first time they're doing this one. And it's combining the Reconnecting Communities pilot program and the Neighborhood Access and Equity program. So that one, I think that one's brand new. The Reconnecting Communities came out last year as well. And you can do 3 types of grants via this, capital construction, community planning, and regional partnerships challenges. And that one I think is around $3 billion. And that one closes September 28th, 2023. And I was looking at the website today for NOFOs, and I think there's about 6 that say summer 2023 or August or July. So probably next time I come here, I'll talk to you guys about some other opportunities. But yeah, lots of discretionary grant opportunities available for folks. That's all I had on my end.
And we'll be updating all of those grant opportunities on our website, gnrc.org/grants. So as soon as those NOFOs come out, we'll update that website so that you all will have access to that as well.
Any questions for our federal partners? No? All right, moving on to the TDOT report. I didn't see a TDOT rep here today. Is anybody here from TDOT? Jennifer?
I think that would be me.
Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry.
I'm Jennifer Marshall.
Looking for Jonathan, I apologize.
Another Jane in the room.
That's right.
So I'm sitting in as TDOT representative for the day. There's nothing prepared. However, if you have any questions, I'll feel free to take them back.
So Jonathan Russell he took a private sector position, correct? Is that right?
That's what I've heard.
Okay. All right. All right. Does anybody else have any questions for TDOT? Okay. I don't have anything for the chair's report. And so I'll hand it over to staff for the staff report.
So first, we've got a list of potential TIP amendments that we will likely be bringing before the board on August 16th. This first one is Franklin project. It may need an urgent adoption outside of a TIP cycle because of lapsing funds. So we may need to add that as an amendment. And then Murfreesboro has 2 projects that we may need to add as amendments outside of the cycle again, because they are in need of moving forward on later phases in their project. But those are the only 3 we've got there. The board will be considering those for adoption at the August 16th meeting. But the next official cycle for amendments, you all will receive those amendments, amendment cycle E, on September 6th, which is your next scheduled TCC meeting.
Those amendments are due the 23rd of this month?
That sounds correct. I will double check that date. I'm gonna hand it to Jessica Hill, our planning director.
Question?
Sure.
Do TIP amendments usually come before the TCC for approval to move forward to the TPC?
Yes,
Okay,
they're usually endorsed.
you're first, and then
Yes.
it moves forward. Okay.
Yes, this is out of cycle, and so we won't be doing that this time, but typically we do the same presentation that we give to the TPB, and TCC endorses, and then TPB actually
Okay.
adopts. Jessica?
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I think a lot of you have heard some presentations on the new EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. It is a non-competitive grant. $3 million was given to all 50 states that were and they were able to choose, elected to participate or not. And then within the US, the 67 most populous cities were eligible for $1 million, or MSAs were eligible for $1 million. The Nashville MSA was one of 3 in the state of Tennessee. So GNRC applied and is going to be the lead agency for this 4-year grant project to develop really 4 deliverables. Well, 2 primary deliverables. The first being a what's called a climate priority climate action plan, a PCAP. And that is due to EPA by March 1st of 2024. So it's looking at greenhouse gas inventory and identifying some ways to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, as well as to provide or improve engagement into underserved and environmental justice areas within the MSA region. And then within the 2 years is a comprehensive climate or priority action plan. So looking across all the sectors of greenhouse gas inventory. So the PCAP is really just focused on kind of what our priority is, and tentatively we've identified transportation as our priority sector that we're going to look at for the PCAP. So the comprehensive climate action plan will be due in, I believe, August of 2025. And then following that delivery will be 2 years of inventory and status report to see how well we're achieving those reduction measures. We are working with, within the MSA, we're working with Metro, but also TDEC, the TDEC Division of Air Quality is the primary agency that is leading the state's efforts. So we'll be coordinating with them. They're about a month ahead of us in terms of award. We have verbal confirmation that we've been awarded and accepted our work plan to start as of yesterday. So we're anticipating getting going relatively quickly. Originally, $6.4 billion of competitive grant funds was going to be made eligible in the spring. That has been moved up to sooner. So we've heard that will be eligible or available for people or organizations to apply for in fall this year. Originally, it was going to be focused on activities that were identified in the PCAP. So I am not as sure how EPA is going to make their decisions on those awards, but as we learn more, we'll keep you all informed. But again, $6.4 billion is available for competitive grants that could work towards greenhouse gas reductions. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair, that the group may have.
Do you have any questions?
I do. For the priority climate action plan, are hiring a consultant to help put that together, or is that being done by staff? Are we putting together like a task force or something to help with it?
Yeah,
Or be part of it? Because if it's transportation focused, you're going to depend on us to help with the reduction in the greenhouse gases.
Yeah, so there's a couple of moving parts. So TDEC has already hired a consultant to assist them with their inventory and assessment. So we'll be coordinating with them on that inventory. I believe we've determined that the base year will be 2019 because we recognize 2020 as a unique year in the transportation field.
Yeah.
With the COVID pandemic reducing travel. So 2019 will be the base year that we've decided to use as for the inventory. And I believe I will look into, I can't remember offhand who the consultant is that TDEC has awarded to assist with their inventory, but we'll most likely be using a lot of the publicly available inventories that EPA has already done and completed. And from our original work plan, we identified or had planned for GNRC to focus primarily on the outreach with our communities and the region. and working with the existing environmental roundtable that was formed in 2020 to assist with the RTP update, but also TCC, TVB, and the GNRC Regional Council will be the primary all existing bodies that will assist in this effort.
So I'm sorry, I'm new to the region. So how do I find out who all is involved in the round table and all of that?
Oh, I can get you a list.
That'd be awesome. I'll give you my card.
Metro we'll be working on, but we've had various levels, as you know, for the climate action plan, and
Yep.
we're moving towards the next level now. Will projects from that be eligible for that third bullet there? Would they have to be projects coming out of the regional plan?
So originally, any projects that were identified in the PCAP were going to be automatically eligible, or the organizations that partnered and their projects that were identified in the PCAP were going to be eligible to apply for that competitive grant funding. Now that the competitive grant funding has been moved forward to fall and the PCAPs won't actually be completed until March, I don't know how EPA will, set the parameters for that call for projects. But I would imagine there are a lot of regions and municipalities that have existing air quality or greenhouse gas emission reduction standards and projects identified that I would assume would most likely be eligible for that grant funding. But yes, we're working with Kendra and John from Metro.
Any other questions for Jessica? Have anything else?
If you have any questions or would like to see the work plan that was submitted, or even just to see what TDEC is doing, reach out and I'm happy to get you the resources.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on, is there anything else for
Yeah,
staff?
a few more things. So just in terms of upcoming meetings, just a few to be aware of. The August 16th Regional Council Body will be meeting, and then shortly after, the special called TPB meeting for the call for projects, as well as adopting any urgent tip amendments. And then your next meeting is on September 6th. The upcoming tip amendment cycles, tip status report, which I'll go through in a minute, as well as a few other items. Next official TPB meeting is September 20th, and then October 18th will be the next regional council body meeting. And those are all in our calendar at gnrc.org/calendar. Lastly, you all have a handout in front of you. This is our tip status report. You may remember we used to call it our staff report. But this is essentially, as of June 30th, all relevant tip information. So I'll walk you through each one of these tables. This is something we'll be producing every month. Local programs from TDOT has now been sending us obligation information monthly. And so we're going to keep updating this report to give you guys the most updated information on projects and amount of funding that's in the tip that is being obligated. So this first figure, it's just an overview of key metrics. So how many projects are in the tip, how many projects have been initiated, total funds in the tip through fiscal year 2026, federal highway funds in the tip through fiscal year 2026, the percentage of FHWA funds obligated. So again, that's as of June 30th. We don't have the July numbers yet, but when we get those, we will update this. And then that last part of this first table, the percentage of tip effective period elapsed. So that's just saying we've gone through 9 months out of the 48 months. That is the total tip period. So we've elapsed about 19% of the tip period. Figure 2 is just the project counts by current phase of work. So just number of projects that are not started, number that are in each of the subsequent phases, and then all projects that are in the tip. So there's currently 214 projects in the tip. And that will continue to change as we amend new projects into the tip as we go forward through the period. So figure 3 is an obligation of highway funding with statewide availability. So these are TDOT's buckets, for lack of a better term. So you'll see that CMAQ bucket, So congestion mitigation and air quality program, the highway safety improvement program, the National Highway Performance Program, Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, and TAP, so Transportation Alternatives Program. So you'll see the amount we have programmed, the obligations we've had in fiscal year 2023, obligation rate, and then the amount obligated in the month of whatever staff report or tip status report we'll be presenting on. Right now, that's June. So you'll see the state programs have a pretty good obligation rate overall. And then we can move on to figure 4, which is our suballocated programs. So STBG, HIP, TAP, and then those CRISA funds. Overall, we've gotten a little better since the last time we presented this. But as you'll see, a lot of that is due to the CRISA funding that was 100% obligated. So if you look at all the other programs, we're not doing as well compared to the state programs in terms of our suballocated funds. And then figure 5 are just obligations on locally managed projects. So this is since October, any locally managed projects that have had authorizations, whether it's NEPA, design, construction, implementation, right of way. And then the obligation amount and the funding source are also there. And then on the back page, just as I mentioned, with all of the grant opportunities, whether they're state or federal sources, we'll be listing those, how much funding is available nationwide or statewide, and then the deadlines for those that you all are up to speed on when they're due and can ask us any questions. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the census areas, just to delineate which urban areas are where in our region. That was a lot of information. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Track in transit or FTA funding?
Not as much as you all know. You all obligate at a pretty high rate, and it doesn't function the same way as highway does.
If there was a transit project that meets the definition, for example, figure 2 with some of those spaces, would those be included in?
Oh, yes. The transit projects are all included in the project counts. Yes.
Do you count it when it's flexed over to FTA, or do you count it when it's flexed over, or when we actually get the money obligated? Just out of curiosity.
When it's flexed over, it'll appear as obligated in our reports. Yes. And then, of course, those total numbers for total funds, that includes transit funding as well.
Can I ask that you guys add some kind of notation under funding availability as to whether those figures are nationwide or local or statewide or MPO based?
For funding availability for the grant.
6.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We can do that.
Like, for instance, multimodal access grant is $18 million
Statewide.
statewide.
Yeah.
But like FHWA charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary grant, 700 million nationwide, and there's no further breakdown that we have available to this region.
Yeah, because those are discretionary grants. It's all depending on who gets the award.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Here, sorry.
No, you're good.
Can you give me the location on your website to find this information? It wasn't part of the agenda.
Oh, yes. We can post this with the slides, and I can send that out.
Yeah, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Questions for Daniel? What do you have for staff presentation? Okay. All right, moving on to item 6, other business. I actually did have one item that I wanted to bring up to the body to see if there was any interest in it. There may not be. But I think this is something that's come up a couple of times. Diana kind of alluded to it. I kind of mentioned it. Sometimes I feel like with the TCC, it's hard to know what the actual role of this body is sometimes, as far as making a recommendation to the policy board or you know, do we look at projects before they vote on them sometimes and that kind of thing? I think there's confusion on that sometimes. It's something I talked with Sean Faltzer a good bit about before he left. I think this is probably one of the only bodies I've ever been a part of, certainly the only body I've ever been the chair of that doesn't have bylaws. The TCC doesn't have bylaws. There's a set of, I forget what you guys call them. Maybe there are bylaws for the the TPB, I believe. But the TCC itself, the roles and responsibilities of this body, which I mean, we all come out here every month and dedicate our time to it. There's really not anything spelled out how it works. I don't think, even as far as like elections for chairman and vice chairman and those kinds of things, or chairperson. And so before Sean had left, I asked him, is that common? You know, because when I worked at TDOT, I dealt with all the NTOs across the state, and they all do things a little differently. But I think most TCCs, or whatever you might want to call them, the technical committees, have a set of bylaws of some kind. We don't. We're kind of an exception in that regard. And so I wanted to know if there's any interest, perhaps, with this body and maybe getting a document like that together to kind of guide the way that we do things and how we review information before it gets to the TPB. We certainly don't want this. This has come up before as a conversation. We don't want this to be a body that gets to kill projects or anything like that, or say what can and can't go to the TPB. But I think maybe a little bit more of a formalization of that discussion is something I've always felt like was maybe needed, and something in writing to tell us what we can and can't do. So I wanted to put it out for the body to see if there's any interest in maybe looking at that.
Yes. And I think it's very needed, you know, having set a few times in for the mayor at the TPC. There's a lot of times items that's come before the board that wasn't here. And I would always ask the question, why is that not being discussed at the TCC? Because that would give us an opportunity of understanding what's going before the board, so that we would have a chance to have that conversation with our elected officials. And then it would help them, provide them with information so that they can make better decisions. And there seems to be a gap that's missing there. So I think bylaws that show what our responsibility, also that items that would go to the TPC, I think should come before this board for recommendation. I don't think we would necessarily shoot it down, but we should either recommend it or actually defer it to maybe add something to it to improve it. But having been involved in multiple MPOs throughout different states and sitting on this board, it typically went to this board for recommendations before it went to the actual board that voted on how it would proceed forward. So I feel like that is something that's definitely missing that we should really consider. And if you want to put together a committee, I'm more than happy to participate in that as well.
Okay, but we don't have a set of bylaws that says that I can set up committees or not set up committees.
Okay, a working group. A working group.
I may decree myself the powers to do it. But I think you're right. When you go to the TPB meetings, and they're very well run, they do a very good job. But I don't know that the TCC really even gets referred to most of the time. Is that should be, to my mind, and you go to Memphis and other places, they'll say, well, what did the TCC or what did our technical committee have to say about that? Pragati down there, who is the MPO coordinator, will talk about how with the discussion that ensued with the TCC before it got to the full body. And so I think that connection, something that would probably be the end goal, is to facilitate that connection between the technical body and the elected officials making the decision a little better. That would be my end goal. Now, another end goal that I have is, the staff at GNRC right now, they're like a lot of us, they're very short staffed. And so I don't want to put a new burden on them, because I know carrying this tip is about all that Daniel can handle right now. And I appreciate that. It's a lot. He's probably doing 2 or 3 people's jobs right now, but so I don't want it to be that. So I'd like it to be something that we as a body do, and that we don't give it to staff to have them, put something else on them to do for us. But I could send out a copy to staff and have them send out this Chattanooga. They've got a really good set of bylaws. They do things a little differently in terms of the way the chair operates, and you guys would see that if you read it. But there's examples we could look at and probably pull together a document and get a draft together in a few months, and maybe come back at some point later this year and adopt something, if everybody's okay with that. But like I said, I wanted to discuss it and see if there's interest before we did anything.
Most definitely.
I would think that since and I don't know, I'm just shooting this out here, I would think that the policy board would need to approve this set of bylaws. Is that not the case?
We'd have to look at what their policy says. And another thing that's a great point. We'd also want to talk with Federal Highway and make sure we're not doing anything that contravenes something and usurps the power of the MPO board. So we want to involve everybody, absolutely, and transparency and involving everybody is something that would be very important. And TDOT as well, we want to involve them. The idea for this, one of the ideas actually came from a conversation I had with somebody over at TDOT a while back, where they mentioned the fact that we don't have bylaws, but a lot of other MPOs do. Why is that? And so I think that was a good point. And yeah, but involving everybody that we can is definitely what we want to do.
And we can look into the feasibility of that and what it would look like for us to facilitate that as well and what other MPOs do. So it wouldn't be too much of a lift for us staff to be able to look into that, to see what other MPOs do and how we can accomplish that. So, yeah.
Well, that was all I had. We're looking.
You'll be sending out the Chattanooga bylaws?
I can do that, and
I think
staff.
that'd be great.
Yes, there may be some other examples from
Yeah,
around the
I
state
can
that we can
text
send out. Yeah.
A couple of the executive directors at other MPOs and ask them to send me the bylaws for their technical committee too.
And as I said, I think some have it, some don't. And so I know Chattanooga does, and there are a few others that do too.
We also have an MPO association statewide, and so we can easily reach out to them, see what their process is.
Well, that's all I had. Does anybody else have any other business to come before this body? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
That is probably better for us.
Everything else.
What I tell everybody, we're not moving. That's what I'm hiring. Not moving again. Not happening.
But I will look into it.
Oh, it was a great show. It was interesting. It's a whole different lifestyle. Completely different. I loved it. So see, I miss it right now.
Executive Northwest Colorado.
Losing it.
He sent me the.
Also used to work in Boston, which has more of a formalized process. So I'll look into it. Obviously, like
That's fine, just label it as an emergency. This did not go to TCC as business. Yeah. We do that in, they should do that in Franklin. There's. The recommendations for the committee members, then they go to the. I would actually, they go to the same night, they go.
That's true. You
They
can go
tell everybody, hey, they're going. They're thinking the same thing. There's gonna be an emergency, right, like a fast action item. Fast action item.
I was talking about that. I said that.
It's been a conversation we've had for a while with TCC. Obviously, it's a building.
I think so.
Yes.
Provide more information. Everybody else.
All and they'll say action items. There also can be something
I might be listening. You say something.
That, in that.
So it's just like, I have a couple trains, I just had to put dogs in, so it would go nuts, but
Hire a contractor like that. No problem.
I'm there.
I should have
Like
done
Red
that.
Oak. Any talk for a time.
And I'm like, I've been there in the area. I'm still on going.
It's actually nice.
Yeah.
Oh, we jacked them up.
You know, they obviously, I got about 3